My name's Michael, and I'm 55 years old today. But the story of why I'm celebrating my 55th birthday alone really began a few years back, when the two people I sacrificed everything for decided I was no longer their father. For almost 30 years, I worked at the same manufacturing plant outside Cleveland, Ohio. I started at the bottom, just another guy on the line, clocking in and out, covered in grease most days. Over time, I worked my way up to a mid-level position, not glamorous, but steady. It paid the bills, gave me a sense of pride, and most importantly, it let me take care of my family. Or at least, that was the idea. My wife back then, Susan, had a very different vision of life. When our daughters were little, Emily was 10, and Hannah only 7, Susan decided she'd had enough. Said she couldn't handle the quiet family life. Said she wanted excitement, adventure, something more. So she packed up her things and left. Her visits after that were unpredictable. Sometimes she'd breeze in with a big smile, carrying promises of trips and fun outings, talking like she was the mother of the year. Other times we wouldn't hear from her for months. I'll never forget one time when Emily was about 14. Susan promised she'd be at Emily's school play. She swore she wouldn't miss it for the world. The girls were so excited, waiting by the door, saving her a seat in the front row. She never showed. Hannah cried herself to sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Emily, trying to explain the unexplainable. She's got her own battles, I told her. But she loves you in her own way. It felt hollow even as I said it. The truth was, Susan was unreliable. And so, most of the time, it was just me and the girls. Now, I wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. But I was present. I showed up. I made their lunches, I sat through their homework meltdowns, I drove them to soccer practice in my beat-up old truck. And I worked. God, did I work. My own childhood was bare bones. Working class to the core. We had food on the table, a roof overhead, but nothing extra. No vacations, no name-brand clothes. I didn't want that for Emily and Hannah. I wanted them to have opportunities one never even dreamed of. So I hustled. My full-time job at the plant was just the start. I took side gigs fixing neighbors' plumbing, patching up roofs, repairing appliances. I even did a little consulting work for smaller shops who needed someone with factory experience. I remember one winter night, after a 12-hour shift at the plant, I spent another 4 hours under a neighbor's sink fixing a burst pipe for $50. I got home after midnight, my knuckles raw and my back screaming, and saw Emily's note on the table asking for money for a school trip. I just put the cash in an envelope and went to bed, because seeing them have what I never did made the ache feel worth it. And it worked, at least on paper. I was able to send Emily and Hannah to a private school instead of the overcrowded public one. I hired tutors to prep them for the SATs. I paid for college, every penny, so they wouldn't start their lives buried in debt. Emily even got to spend a semester abroad in Barcelona, something I never could have imagined for myself at her age. Hannah needed a car when she started her first job. I signed the loan, no hesitation. We weren't rich. My house was modest, and my old Ford truck had been patched so many times it was practically a quilt of spare parts. But my daughters never went without. They had what mattered. For years, that was enough. I thought I'd done right by them. I thought love, sacrifice, and consistency would outweigh Susan's chaos. But as the girls grew into their 20s, things began to change. Susan reappeared, this time with a new man on her arm. His name was David, and he looked every bit the successful businessman. He wore sharp suits, drove a Lexus, talked about investments and partnerships. Susan seemed transformed around him, polished, confident, like she'd been reborn into some fancier version of herself. And David? He wasted no time stepping into Emily and Hannah's lives. At first, I thought maybe this was a blessing. More people looking out for the girls couldn't hurt, right? He pulled strings to get Emily an internship at a marketing firm. He introduced Hannah to people at a local creative agency. They were impressed, naturally. He made things happen quickly, things I could never have arranged. But slowly, the tone shifted. The girls' calls to me got shorter. Their visits became rare. They were busy, more often than not, usually with something that involved David and Susan. They'd mention his beautiful house, his friends, his connections. Compared to all that, my little home and quiet life probably looked dull. I remember planning a camping trip, something we used to love when they were kids. Just the three of us, roasting marshmallows, telling stories by the fire. I thought it'd be a great way to reconnect. But the night before, Emily canceled. David was taking them to some gala in the city. Hannah followed with her own excuse. David had lined up a networking event. That was the first time I really felt the sting. They weren't my little girls anymore. They were slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. At first, I told myself it was just part of growing up. Kids grow, they branch out, they find new influences. Maybe David was just another mentor in their lives. But soon, little cracks appeared, and those cracks spread fast. It started with strange questions. Emily would call and ask casual things like, "Dad, do you think I take after Mom more than you?" Or, "Do you ever wonder about family genetics?" I brushed it off, thinking she was just curious. Hannah was quieter, but I noticed the same tension in her voice. Then came the night that changed everything. I was at home, eating leftovers on the couch, when Emily called. Her voice was hesitant, shaky. "Dad," she said, "is there anything you haven't told us about Mom? About before the divorce?" I frowned. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She paused. "Mom told me she had an affair, back when you two were married. She said there's a chance you're not our biological father." I sat there, stunned. For all the problems Susan and I had, her temper, her selfishness, I had never once questioned that Emily and Hannah were mine. "Emily," I said slowly, "your mother's telling you lies. I was there for everything. From the first ultrasound to every scraped knee, I was there." But she pressed on. "David says that, for legal reasons, you know, estate planning and all that, he could adopt us as adults. He says it would make things simpler. That way, we'd be fully recognized as part of his and Mom's family." That word, adopt, cut through me like a blade. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the old pipes groan, wondering how far Susan had gone to rewrite history in their heads. A week later, both Emily and Hannah showed up at my house together. They sat down on my worn-out couch, fidgeting with their hands. Emily spoke first. "Dad," she began, "Mom told us she had an affair around the time I was conceived. And another one before Hannah was born. She's almost sure you're not our father. She wants to make it right now." Hannah looked up from her lap, her voice soft. "David explained it to us. If he adopted us, it would make inheritance easier. Just legal stuff. Taxes. Financial security." Then Emily added the words that broke me. "It's not personal, Dad. It's just David fits better with our lives now. Mom's happier. And we have more opportunities with him." I can't even describe what it felt like in that moment. Years of late nights, overtime shifts, fixing leaky roofs and broken appliances, pouring every ounce of myself into their future, and they sat there calmly telling me I wasn't their father. I didn't argue. Instead, I stood up and went to the old filing cabinet in the corner of the room. The drawer stuck, as always, before sliding open with a groan. Inside was a manila folder I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out and set it on the table in front of them. "This," I said, "is from the divorce. Susan tried to claim I wasn't Emily's father back then, maybe to dodge child support, maybe just to spite me. The court required paternity tests for both of you." I spread out the papers, official, notarized, undeniable. Legally verified. "You are both my daughters." Emily picked up the top sheet, her eyes scanning the official letterhead and the 99.9% probability result before she placed it back on the coffee table as if it were a takeout menu. Hannah wouldn't even touch the paper. Mom explained that science has improved since then, Emily said, refusing to meet my eyes. David said it's better to be sure about these things, for everyone's peace of mind. David offered to pay for new tests. Hannah added quietly. But he also said, what's the point? What matters is who steps up. I could feel my blood pounding in my ears. But the worst part wasn't Susan's lies or David's manipulation, it was the indifference in my daughter's eyes. They weren't even angry. They just didn't care. Dad, Emily said, almost like she was reciting lines. We appreciate everything you did when we were kids. But we're adults now. We have to think about our future. Mom and David are offering us something different. Something better. They sat there waiting for me to react, maybe to shout, maybe to cry. But I didn't give them that. I just gathered the papers back into their envelope, slid them into the folder, and put it away. I looked at them one last time, the girls I had raised, the girls I had worked myself ragged for, and I realized something deep and painful. They had already made their choice. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. What was the point? After they left that night, I sat alone in the quiet of my living room, staring at the old carpet and the grooves in the coffee table where Emily once carved her initials as a child. The air felt heavy, like someone had dropped a stone in my chest. But somewhere inside me, something shifted. A line had been crossed. The very next morning, I made phone calls. First, I cut off every bit of financial support. The allowance I'd been giving Hannah for supplies, gone. The rent money I quietly sent Emily each month in the city, stopped. I called my insurance company and removed them both from my health plan. They were adults. They could get their own. Then there was Hannah's car. I had co-signed her loan, thinking I was giving her a safe way to get to work. I called the bank and revoked my guarantee. It took paperwork and persistence, but eventually it was done. If she wanted to keep the car, she could refinance. Or David could sign his name next to hers. I had even set up small savings accounts for each of them years earlier. Every month, I'd tucked away a little for their rainy day. I closed those accounts and moved the money back into my own. Finally, I sent them both a message. Just one. It read, I have received your decision regarding your family and future. Since you no longer consider me your father, I will no longer be providing for your adult lives. I wish you well. That was it. No anger. No begging. No long explanations. Just facts. Then I blocked their numbers. For the first time in years, the house was utterly silent. No calls asking for money. No texts about textbooks or apartment deposits. No half-hearted visits squeezed between David's events. Just me, my creaky house, and the steady rhythm of my work. It wasn't easy. Every room held a memory. Emily's childhood drawings still taped to the wall of the hallway. Hannah's trophies collecting dust on a shelf. At night, I'd sit in the recliner and hear echoes of their laughter. Cutting them off financially was one thing. Cutting them out of my heart was something else entirely. Months passed. I unblocked their numbers eventually, half out of habit, half out of curiosity. But the silence remained. They were busy with their new life. I assumed, wrapped up in Susan and David's shiny promises. Then, little by little, whispers of reality trickled back to me. David wasn't the rock he pretended to be. His business empire took a hit, one big deal collapsed, and the ripples spread fast. The firm where Emily interned. They never offered her a full-time position. The agency Hannah joined? They lost their biggest client, staff, and cut her hours until there was barely anything left. And Susan, true to form, started pulling back. The promises dried up. The emotional support, the financial safety net, it all began to crumble. 6 months after I'd sent my text, the first feeler came. A short message from Hannah. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. No mention of what had happened. No apology. Just a soft tap on the door. A week later, Emily left a voicemail. Hi Dad, it's me. Was just thinking about you. Call me if you want. I didn't answer either one. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? Sure, honey, let's pretend none of that ever happened. Silence stretched out again. But then, on a Saturday morning almost a year after that ugly conversation, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find both of them standing on the porch. Emily's eyes were red, puffy from crying. Hannah looked like she hadn't slept in days. Their faces weren't polished or confident anymore. They were tired, broken in a way I hadn't seen before. Dad, Emily whispered, can we talk? I stood there for a long second, saying nothing. Then finally I nodded once. All right. 10 minutes. They blinked, surprised. Maybe they'd expected me to slam the door. Maybe they thought I'd shout or pull them into a hug. Instead, I just turned and walked back inside. They followed quietly, like children being led into the principal's office. We stood in the living room, the same one where they once told me David fit better in their lives. I didn't offer them a seat. I stayed standing, arms crossed. Emily started. Her voice cracked. Dad, we messed up. Really badly. Hannah's lip trembled. We were so stupid. Emily shook her head, eyes filling again. Mom was so convincing. And David, he made everything sound so good. Like this amazing new life was waiting for us. I wanted to believe it. I wanted things to be exciting. Easy. Hannah spoke next, quieter. I just wanted to feel like I was part of something successful. David seemed so successful. Mom was happy. I thought maybe this was my chance. But, her voice broke. We didn't understand what we were throwing away. They went on like that for a while. Excuses about pressure from Susan, promises from David, how they got swept up. And now, with David's money gone and Susan's mask slipping, they were left stranded. I didn't interrupt. I didn't hand Hannah a tissue or put a hand on Emily's shoulder. I just stood there, listening, my face like stone. When they finally ran out of words, they looked at me, hopeful, scared, desperate. That was when I spoke. Calm. Even. Cold. So let me get this straight. Your mother, who abandoned you and broke her promises for years, told you I wasn't your father. Her new husband, a man you barely knew, offered to adopt you for tax reasons. And you both, my educated adult daughters, decided that was a good plan. They both flinched, like I'd struck them. Good. I wasn't done. You told me you wanted a fresh start, Emily. A fresh start from what, exactly? From the man who missed his own brother's birthday to pay for your semester in Barcelona? From the father who patched this roof himself in a thunderstorm so you'd have a dry bed to sleep in? Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. I turned to Hannah. And you wanted to feel part of something successful? Was my life, my sacrifices, not enough of a success in your eyes? Her shoulders shook as tears spilled freely. No, Dad, that's not, we didn't mean. You didn't mean? I cut in. What did you mean when you looked at legal proof of your paternity and dismissed it? What did you mean when you told me David fit better with your lives? They had no answer. Only tears. The silence in the room was thick. My words had landed, and the girls stood frozen, their faces wet with tears. Emily finally spoke, her voice breaking. Dad, please, we know we were wrong. We're so sorry. I shook my head slowly. Sorry isn't a magic word. It doesn't undo choices. You both made yours. When you looked me in the eye and said David fit better with your lives, that was no slip of the tongue. That was a decision. A rejection. Hannah's shoulders shook harder. We didn't mean to throw you away. I cut her off. But you did. You stood right here, in this room, and you disowned me as your father. You dismissed proof, legal proof, because it was easier to believe Susan's story. And you let David, a man you barely knew, take my place because he had money and shiny promises. They didn't argue. They couldn't. They just cried. I took a step closer, my voice calm but final. You came back because David's money is gone. Because your mother is showing her true colors again. You didn't come back when everything looked good. You came back when your safety net broke, hoping I'd still be here to catch you. Emily opened her mouth but shut it again when she saw my face. Well, I said, steady as stone. Here's my decision. You're right, you threw something away. You threw away trust, loyalty, and the bond we had. And when you walked out of this house after that conversation, you became Susan's daughters. David's stepdaughters. Not mine. Their tears flowed freely now, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just clarity. Your 10 minutes are up, I said quietly. There's nothing for you here. Not my money. Not my help. Not my time. Go back to Susan and David. You chose them, live with that choice. Emily's face crumpled. Dad, you can't mean that. We're your daughters. I shook my head. No. You made it clear. You are not. Maybe biologically you are, but you yourselves rejected that. And you rejected me. So no, you are not my daughters. Not anymore. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Emily gently took Hannah's arm, guiding her toward the door. I didn't stop them. I didn't say another word. I just watched as they walked down the path to the car I once helped Hannah buy, got inside, and drove away. When the door clicked shut behind them, the house felt lighter. Like a storm had finally passed. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel grief anymore. What I felt was peace, harsh maybe, but clean. 1 year later. It's been a year since that final confrontation. I haven't heard a single word from Emily or Hannah. No texts, no emails, no birthday calls. They took me at my word, or maybe Susan and David still have them tangled up in their chaos. I don't know. I don't ask. And strangely enough, I don't care. For over 20 years, I gave them everything. Every decision I made, overtime shifts, second jobs, saying no to vacations or new clothes for myself, was for them. And when they had the chance to stand by me, they didn't hesitate to walk away. The well of fatherly feeling inside me ran dry the day they looked at those paternity papers and dismissed them like trash. What I told them in that last meeting, that wasn't anger. That was truth. They'd already burned the bridge, I just confirmed it was gone. Now my life is simple. I still work at the plant. I still wear patched-up jeans and drive my old truck. My house still has the same creaky floorboards and the porch I never repainted. But it's quiet here. Peaceful. No more drama. No more last-minute calls begging for tuition money. No more emergencies that only I could solve. I live for myself now. And in a strange way, I'm doing better than ever. As for Susan and David? I hear bits and pieces. They moved to another city. Some say David's still scrambling after failed ventures, and Susan is the same as she always was, demanding, dramatic, chasing the next thrill. People like her don't change. And David learned the hard way that trying to buy himself a ready-made family isn't as glamorous as it looks. But that's not my concern anymore. Their choices aren't my problem. So that's it. That's the story. There's no big redemption arc, no lesson learned on their part, and no reunion hug at the end. Just the quiet of my house and the peace that comes with closing a door for good. The bridge they burned is gone, and I've learned to stop staring at the ashes. Some stories don't have happy endings. Some stories just end. What do you think about Michael's decision? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more content.